I just got a package from UPS, heading out to the shop. First time I've ordered from Pop's Knife Supply, and I was pretty impressed. They had all the belts I needed, and I saved about almost 50 bucks over the usual cost of my orders from another supplier. Right. Anyway, this is so I talked to Andy Roy when I was at ICCE, and I knew that he and some partners of his had went ahead and purchased Pop's Knife Supply. So he asked me to take a look at their website. Of course, I never ordered from Pop's because their website sucked, and you always had to call. I just didn't feel like calling. So anyway, I did take a look at Andy's website, and everything was really easy to find. Had everything I needed, and the prices were really good, even without any kind of quantity discounts. So, I'm crooked here. All right, so what my normal order for belts is. So I usually buy 10 at a time of each grit. So we got 10 each here of 15 micron 3M films. The Hermes J-Flex 120s. This is not the right belt. They'll probably work, but they're not what I was expecting. The Norton Blaze. These are 50 grit. Norton Blaze ceramics, J-Flex 220s, and the Hermes J-Flex 400s. All right, so I'm going to start out just talking about the tools that I use for trimming up my drill press, and then I'll get into talking about how I actually go about doing the trimming process on the drill press. First thing that I use, and I'm just going to talk about how I do this. I know there's other ways. I've given classes to people on how to trim their drill press using a coat hanger. But for these videos, I'm always going to talk about my process and how I do things. So I'm going to have some tools that some of you may not have, and the tools that I use, some of you may look at and think that they're archaic. It all depends on where you're coming from. So for me, for trimming my drill press, the tools that I use a dial test indicator. It's something like this. I think you can pick up something like this for under 50 bucks. And it usually comes with a little parts kit. I think I bought the whole thing, this, with this adapter. And this is actually part of the adapter. There's another piece that clamps onto the spindle, but I don't use that. So you need an adapter that's going to hold the dial test indicator. On this drill press, I need a 19mm wrench, and another thing that's really nice to have is a small dead blow hammer. And it doesn't really necessarily need to be a dead blow hammer. It can be a rubber mallet, but I suggest that you don't use a steel hammer and put dents in your drill press table. So what I got set up here is I've got my dial test indicator set up on a gauge pin. This is a 1/4-inch gauge pin. And I would use something larger, but this chuck only goes up to 3/8 of an inch anyway. And this is just to check the run out on the chuck. It is very possible to have a bent arbor on a drill press. I know a lot of people knock them out with a hammer and different ways they fall over. You may not know the history of your drill press. There's all kinds of reasons that there could be damage to either your spindle or more likely your arbor. So it's a good idea before you trim in your drill press just to make sure that your chuck and your spindle are running as true as possible. So in this case, I've got the dial test indicator set up and I've got it zeroed out. And remember, each small mark is 5/10,000ths of an inch. So we'll start rotating this. And okay, so there's 5/10, and then we're going back to 0. All right, and that's about 1 inch off of the end of the chuck. Now this is a Jacobs chuck. This is one of the older high quality Jacobs chucks, and it's in really good shape. So with a good arbor and the spindles in decent condition, very little run out on that. So make sure you check that before you start trying to tram your drill press. All right, so the first thing you need to do when you're going to adjust the table is you're going to have to loosen this nut, this bolt up here. Now be aware, some drill presses come with the table pinned. This hole right here is where there was a pin that held the table to the column so that you couldn't adjust the tram of the table. And it took me a while to figure that out and realize that I had to actually remove this pin to be able to adjust this, this table left and right. So all you got to do is come in here with a wrench and loosen this up. And of course, I've got mine pretty tight. There we go. And I'm not going to loosen it too much, just enough to take the load off of it so that I can make adjustments to it. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this adapter into the chuck. And I'm going to tighten it up. Now the DTI, the dial test indicator, is going to go on the arm, and I'm going to adjust this. Get it where you can see it. I'm going to adjust it so that it's touching the drill press table. And I want the indicator to be pretty much facing straight out. Let me get these tools out of the way. All right. So now, I don't know. Let me. Now I'm going to have to leave it like that. So, and then I'm going to adjust this bevel so that my needle is sitting at 0. And honestly, it needs to be sitting at 0 about right here. Okay. So now that it's sitting at 0 on this side, all I need to do is rotate the spindle around to the opposite side and watch the sweep. Now, I got 1 hash mark, which is equal to, on this indicator, that 1 hash mark. And what I'll do is I'll adjust this back to 0 and bring it back around so you can see. That 1 hash mark is equal to 5/10,000ths of an inch. So this table is trimmed in very accurately already. Less than 1,000th difference, half of 1,000th difference between one side and the other. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and loosen it up. I'm going to throw it out of tram, and then I'm going to show how I adjust that. Okay, so I'm going to throw this just slightly out of tram by tapping on the other side of it, and you'll see the needle jump on the dial test indicator. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep sweeping this back and forth as I make adjustments. So I'm going to set this to 0 on this side. And then I'm going to sweep it around. And I'm showing out about 20 thousandths. So I'm going to give a small tap. I'm going to set it back to 0. All right, and then I'm going to sweep it back around. Okay, so it actually came back to 0. So that's pretty close. Now here's the thing. Right now, there's a little bit of slack on that nut on the bottom. So what I need to do is I need to come back in and I'm going to tighten that nut about halfway. So I don't want to bring it down fully tight yet, but I want to start putting some tension on it. And then I'm going to sweep again. So I'm at 0 on this side. And it moves. I mean, you can't do a whole lot about the column tilt. And make sure that you're clamped down tight. But your side to side you can. Now I got about 2 thousandths difference from one side to the other. So I'm going to set this, I'm going to 0 it here, and I'm actually going to make an adjustment to the test indicator because I think it's not getting good contact. I'm going to set it to 0. Okay. And then I'm going to sweep it around. And I am a 1/2 thousandth off. All right, so now I'm getting a pretty nice accurate sweep. If I keep it loaded in the same direction I'm moving, I'm getting a 0. Come back around, I'm at 0. All right. Now the bolt on the bottom is not completely tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and when I tighten that bolt, it wants to torque the table to one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my hand down firmly against this side to try to keep the table from moving as I tighten it that last little bit. And I was watching the indicator, and that thing is nice and tight and it's still sitting at 0. So we should have a nice clean sweep all the way around, and we should end up, should have ended up at 0. And we should end up at 0. All right. All right, so that's how I tram the drill press table. There's lots of other ways, and I know guys will put a twist drill in here and hold a square up to it. And honestly, if that's all you got, that's better than nothing. But this by far is the most accurate method that I have tried. If you got any questions, post them in the comments section. If you liked this, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I've got more videos coming. I'm going to continue to try to pump out at least one video a week. That's it for today. Ranger Made Knives out.